But then down the road, when we started thinking about what would provide value, what we ended up doing is going and kind of seeing where it would be most impactful and who is actually already active on these channels. Because that's the other thing. You probably have already in your company a lot of people active. And so what we did was we ran a pilot, and it was very, very successful with senior leaders. So these are people that are already active because they are thought leaders in the space. A lot of them are subject matter experts as well. So they're already going to be doing this. Why wouldn't we give them the proper tools, give them some insight into what's happening within the business itself, and utilize their platform? And so we ran it was a very short pilot.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm super excited to connect with Priya Shah. She is a social media and public relations expert with 15 years of experience working with B2B organizations and global enterprises. Her extensive corporate background inspired her to develop the Shah Squared communications model, a 5-phase framework designed to help companies effectively leverage social media to achieve business success. Congrats on your success with Shah Squared, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Karl. It's great to be here.
So I've definitely seen so many companies do the wrong things online. But what are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies do when they're trying to leverage social media?
I think it's really seeing it from a narrow lens and not looking at it from those broader aspects. So for me, it's seeing a company put all of their time and energy and focus into their brand channels and not realizing that their brand extends so much further than just to those channels. There are people that are constantly speaking about their brand that work for them every single day and not giving them any access. But I think even more so, if they do give them access, restricting that access, telling them what to do, when to do, what, all the time, that it takes out the human piece. They are people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think especially at the enterprise level, they forget that it's still those personal relationships that drive the business forward. That even if you're closing a big like B2B sale, it's the individual relationships between the salespeople and the representatives at the client company and all the other people involved that move things forward. And so if you don't let people be themselves online or build those relationships, then you're really hamstringing your opportunities, because that's really what makes the business happen.
100%. I think really what I've seen I think the most damaging is when you strip people of that human element, where you're basically giving them canned messaging that they then spray everywhere. And especially if you're connected to multiple people within that company, you see a LinkedIn post and you're scrolling down a little bit further and you see the exact same post, but it's different people. It then, in my eyes, almost changes from being a strategy and something beneficial from a marketing standpoint to being propaganda. I mean, you're basically just spewing whatever your company is saying, which I think then lessens the trust that you have with that person.
Yeah, I know I've seen, especially if you do a search by like a tag, like tag for a specific industry, and you see the same post 3 or 4 times from different people, I immediately just kind of write that off as that's just basically like running an ad, or it's not really a person saying that. They're just a mouthpiece for this, for marketing. It's not real. Mm-hmm. And so immediately I devalue what's being said, because it's obviously not their words. It's the company trying to speak through them, and it almost hits like that uncanny valley, is like where they're trying to be, like the company's trying to be authentic and real, but just not quite getting there. So it comes across as really creepy and weird, and you have like even a worse reaction that they didn't say anything, because their attempts and failures to be authentic or be to engage do more damage than they help.
I agree. I think really what it comes down to is it's twofold. It's one of, I don't really feel like this company is being genuine from the standpoint that they're telling their employees what to do and that this is the only option, that it's just that. Or on the flip side with the people, it's that I personally wouldn't want to have something like that go out on my personal profile. So then I think it makes you question that person. So it's, it's not just damaging to a brand, it's damaging to a person's reputation. And so I think between those two things, rather than focus on trying to get the right message out that's been perfectly crafted by legal and everybody's gotten their hands involved, instead to really think about giving them the tools, giving them the training, thinking about how they can then put their own spin, because we all have a different kind of lens on every single thing that happens in this world. And so for them to be able to say, okay, I know that this topic is important. I'm going to tell you from my point of view why I care about this company, why you should look at this product. All of those things I think resonate so much more with people than, here's some canned message. It really doesn't have any personality to it. And it also is going to stick out like a sore thumb if you are somebody who focuses on your personal brand. It's going to look very strange.
Yeah, and it's something that I think there's the overcraftedness and the like it's too perfect kind of feel is something that people are getting more and more aware of with AI content, just like, and like they're getting used to like noticing tone and the kind of cadence of the way things are written, that if it doesn't come across, like, and so people make mistakes, people have little idiosyncrasies and variations in the way they communicate, and like I said, varying perspectives. And so giving the employees a chance to insert their unique take on things or their feelings and have it come across in their actual voice is much more effective than what a lot of companies are doing, like you said. And I think it also just comes from this, in general, especially with marketing, companies are too like risk averse or fear averse, and they want to do things like a sure thing, have been like overly planned and processed, and they're not willing to just put things out there and connect and aren't taking enough risk, especially when, and it seems like, yeah, there might be a few like things that might need clarifying or some follow-ups if someone goes way too off base, but if there's a little bit of variance, that's normal, that's human. You should celebrate that instead of being afraid of it. And it's the companies that are able to take those risks and present a more natural, authentic, genuine human connection with people are going to be performing way better, especially when people are in this era of craving connection and feeling like they're wanting a place to belong. And if you polish down the front of your business so it's like a mirror shine with nothing for people to grab onto, they're not going to connect, because there's nowhere. You need some friction, some rough spots for people to get purchase. And I think companies ought to have these like try to present these slick, shiny mirror glass polished fronts that people just slide right off of, because there's nowhere for them to grab onto and really engage. And it's unfortunate that a lot of leadership teams just don't get how it's those risks, it's those unperfect elements that actually are more effective than what they're doing.
I think so. And I think also that there's at times not necessarily a direct connection to ROI in that more traditional sense. It's not that here's a lead gen and a CTA, and then they have all these other pieces that they want to have in place, or a UTM code. We want to make sure we track this. Well, there is also value in just talking about things or highlighting things. And I think especially coming from, I mean, you mentioned the senior leaders or the executives, when it comes to them sharing some of this content, particularly, I mean, that can really, I think in a positive way, bring your company away from, really being in a space where it's going, it's underneath their umbrella of what's approved, but it's telling the real truth of like, I'm feeling this way. I'm an authentic leader. I believe in my values. And I think that can attract not only customers and investors, but talent, because you know that you're getting the people at the top care about things. And so by not putting them in a box and saying you can only do these things. And so consequently, what I've seen happen more than anything else is that they just don't say anything at all. And they're just completely silent. They post 2-3 posts about the company during the year at some point, and that's it. You have no idea who these people are. And so if you're on one side, let's say you're applying to a job and you have one CEO that's doing that. The other CEO is sharing elements of their life. They're sharing elements of, the different wins that the team is having and giving kudos and all sorts of things, but also sharing, what's happening on the financial front. Which company is going to be more attractive to you?
The second one, totally, because I think you just illustrated a huge problem that a lot of companies have, and their leadership is so disconnected from the people they're supposed to be leading that they can't really lead because there's no relationship there. It's all like a transactional employer-employee thing. There's not like anything beyond the transaction. So it leads to a lot of all the issues we're seeing in businesses today with the way they're run and the way employees are treated and the way employees feel at work. I think could be improved upon by leadership being able to be themselves and connect with more people and communicate better with everyone, and not just have it all go through this filter of the overly controlled inside the box sort of process. So I'm sure, and I'd love to hear some examples of companies you've worked with that have gone from this overly cautious, overly polished to a more human approach, and kind of what was that process like and what were the results?
So I have a really good example with a former employer of mine where we had, it's kind of an interesting evolution that happened where there was a tool in place when I started, which was more like what we've been talking about, where you didn't actually have necessarily editing rights. So what was happening is that a lot of the time they were just sharing the same things that were coming from the brand. And part of it was that somebody at some point said, oh, employee advocacy, that sounds great, and found this tool, but they weren't doing anything with the tool. It was just kind of sitting there. People were able to request access if they wanted, but weren't given any training besides getting access. And it really wasn't, there was no one managing it. And so consequently, what happened? Well, here we are, we're at a company, we're looking at costs and where do we want to spend our money? Well, guess what happens? It loses its funding. We don't need that budget anymore. And so that was actually a good thing because it wasn't really providing value. But then down the road, when we started thinking about what would provide value, what we ended up doing is going and kind of seeing where it would be most impactful and who is actually already active on these channels. Because that's the other thing. You probably have already in your company a lot of people active. And so what we did was we ran a pilot And it was very, very successful with senior leaders. So these are people that are already active because they are thought leaders in the space. A lot of them are subject matter experts as well. So they're already going to be doing this. Why wouldn't we give them the proper tools, give them some insight into what's happening within the business itself, and utilize their platform? And so we ran it was a very short pilot. It was only 6 weeks, but insane results. It was incredible, where just having them be able to be supportive, because I was on calls every week, so was our rep for the tool, and we were able to give them a lot of support. A counterpart who was in charge of external communications and PR would join these calls because she knew what was happening on the other side. And so having a team that you can rely on, having a place where it was just open hours, that's what I think was the difference. It was not necessarily a tool itself or even the program. It was giving it thought, thinking about the strategy, thinking about who do we include in this program and why. And then from there, also saying, okay, here's something that's super easy for you to use. And it's something where you're going to have a support team. So you have questions, you want to just brainstorm ideas. Here's 30 minutes on a Friday. Join the call, don't join the call. It's totally your choice. But it wasn't a heavy lift on anyone. So what happens? Everyone uses it. Everyone beats what they were supposed to do by, 5 times, 10 times of just saying, okay, you need to post once a week. Instead, they're posting 3, 4, 5 times a week. They're now adopting this tool and using it as, their main tool for all of their content. So it just ended up being really interesting seeing what can happen.
And I think I love that result. And I think the fact that they're posting more than just the requirement shows how it made them feel like it was enhancing what they were already wanting to do, not something they were forced to do or curtailing what they were trying to do. It was an enhancement, not a restriction.
Mhm.
And I think so many people or so many companies come from it as we got to control what people are saying on social versus people are already talking. Let's enhance it and try to, if we want them to say certain things, give them the tools they need to say things the right way, but in their way, not try and provide all these structures and shackles to keep them from saying it anyway, except the way we think it should be said, which is what so many companies do. So I love that you came from it, from the mindset of how do we help them do what they're already doing better versus how do we make them do it the way we want them to do it. And I think that's such a refreshing mindset compared to what so many other companies, how they approach this sort of relationship with employees or leadership. And it's, that's really awesome. And so if someone was thinking, okay, how do we start applying this sort of approach to our own company? What would be like a good first step for them to take?
I think there's technically, I would say there's 2 different paths you can go in. There's always the volunteer path, ask for people that are wanting to join something like this, that are already gung-ho, because you're always going to have more success with people that are hand raisers. So, on one side, asking people and saying, hey, we're wanting to start, we're just going to start small. We're just doing this little pilot program. And we're really interested in expanding our brand through some of our voices. Would you be interested in having a call to action that way? Or on the other side, being able to take a little bit of time and see who your all-stars are. Do some simple searches on, who is talking about your brand. If you're at enterprise level, you should have access to some of the more premium quality features within LinkedIn. You should be able to pretty easily identify them, and then go the other way. Go and approach them and say, hey, I've been seeing that you have some really amazing content. Would you be interested in learning a little bit more from our company standpoint, where we could go through some training around, some of our social media policies and things that we have, just to give you a little bit of insight into, what we do and do not do, but be able to also give you access to this tool where it might make your posting a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that double-pronged approach, and it really makes especially the asking for volunteers, because if you're especially trying to get a group of people to change behavior is tricky, but if someone's already wanting to do it or already thinking about doing it, coming from that, hey, let's help you make this easier, is always going to be much more warmly received than announcing to a whole team, you got to start posting online something you're not really comfortable doing or ever done before, and now you just have to do it because we're telling you to. It's always going to be people digging in the heels, and when that happens. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Priya. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Priya, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.